morning and welcome to 3 Minutes on Markets and Money. I'm your host, Lance Roberts. Today, I want to talk about something a little bit different, which is why managing your portfolio is a lot like tending a garden. I know, seems a little weird, but bear with me real quick because there's a reason that I want to talk about this. The first is that this was the fastest recovery, according to the headlines anyway, the fastest recovery from a bear market ever on record. Now, this is occurring at a time where we have one of the lowest levels of participation in the markets currently. And more importantly, as we take a look at investor positioning, of course, and looking at markets, the top 10 stocks and of course are making up the largest chunk of the return of the markets this year, and forward expectations on earnings are those valuations now are at some of the highest levels ever on record. We combine that with the fact that our positioning gauge is now at extreme levels as investors are getting just exceedingly bullish on markets, and even our technical indicators on price are now back to near record levels on a lot of different fronts. And the reason this is important is that portfolios, much like a garden, actually operate in seasons. So the point is when you start thinking about your portfolio, is thinking about your portfolio in terms of a garden. And as gardens do, just as markets do, everything has a season. So in the spring, I want to plant certain vegetables. In the summer, I harvest some and I plant for my fall garden. And then when winter is coming, I want to make sure that I've harvested my bounty for the year and I prepare the soil and everything else for the winter season, right? Whatever plants I've got that are going to go through the winter, want to make sure they're prepared for that. Cold weather tends to be a problem. Same thing for the markets. Markets right now are exceedingly overbought, exceedingly extended, and this suggests that, well, maybe, just maybe, possibly, that we may be very late into the summer and fall season for our garden, which means that we need to harvest the bounty. And a garden, much like a portfolio, works exactly the same way. You prepare the soil by accumulating cash to invest, and of course you plant according to the season. And if we don't water and fertilize, obviously our plants won't grow. Importantly though, we have to pull the weeds. If we don't pull weeds in the garden, eventually weeds will take over the entire garden. And this is why we sell laggards and losers in portfolios. Ultimately, we have to harvest and take profits. If we don't harvest and take profits out of our positions, then of course the problem is they're going to rot on the vine. We're going to actually lose those profits at some point when winter approaches. If we don't harvest, we lose everything that we had gained in the garden over that time. And ultimately, we've got to plan again once winter passes for the new season, right? So very much so when we start talking about gardening and managing a portfolio, there's a lot of similarities here. So with markets at exuberant levels and with markets at very high levels of participation and very exceeding levels on technical bases, this suggests that maybe we might be approaching more of a winter period for the markets, which means that we need to harvest and take in some of those gains and rebalance risk in portfolios. So exactly what do we need to do? Well, I've got some steps for you. So the first thing that we want to do is clean up the portfolio. So currently now at this juncture, we want to tighten up stop loss levels, hedge portfolios against potential risk, take profits in positions that have been doing exceedingly well. Of course, sell laggards and losers, right? We still have to pull the weeds because if we don't pull the weeds, they'll eventually take over the garden. And obviously raise cash and rebalance positions in portfolios as well. So once we do that, once we go through the cleanup process now, so we've gone out into the garden, we've harvested it, we've cleaned it up, it's ready, it's prepared. We've got to also compare our portfolio allocation to our model. So how far out of balance have we gotten? So we need to determine areas where we need to actually allocate money. So again, just like a garden going into winter, there's still things that we can hold and grow over winter periods. There are plants that can do that. So we want to make sure that we increase exposure in those areas, calculate how many shares we need to fill those allocations, determine our cash requirements to make those purchases, ultimately re-examine our portfolio to raise sufficient cash and meet the requirements for rebalancing, determine our entry price for levels, because look, the great thing about a winter is that we get to set up again for the spring, plant new plants, and of course we can't plant new plants, we can't buy new positions if we haven't raised cash to do so. And obviously evaluate our stop loss levels, move those up as we said, prepare for potential downturns in markets, and establish our profit taking and sell levels. Look, these are all basic rules of portfolio management over time, and when you look at the markets to where we are currently, it certainly suggests that we may be very late into the current fall period. So again, thinking about winter coming, harvesting here a bit, preparing for an eventual downturn that will ultimately occur. And generally, corrections occur when investors least expect them to. It could also save you from potentially setting yourself back as we enter into that winter period. I'm your host, Lance Roberts, for 3 minutes on markets and money and why your portfolio is a lot like tending a garden. We'll see you next time right here on 3 Minutes of Markets and Money, realinvestmentadvice.com.